Iran built a hidden stockpile of uranium to protect itself from ever being destroyed. But that one decision may now be the exact reason its regime gets pushed to the edge. Somewhere under a mountain in central Iran, there's enough enriched uranium to build several bombs, and the world knows it exists, but cannot see where it is. That single fact is now driving one of the most dangerous standoffs on Earth. Right now, satellites are watching a mountain in central Iran. Trucks move in and out of tunnel entrances. Officials in Washington talk about a strike like it is only a matter of time. And inside that mountain, sitting somewhere in the dark, is a stockpile of uranium that could change the outcome of this entire conflict. Most people watching this conflict think it is just another round of the same old fighting. Missiles fired, ships attacked, angry statements from generals. Then a pause, then it starts again. That is the pattern people have gotten used to over the years. But this time is different. And the difference comes down to one thing that has nothing to do with oil or ships or even missiles. It comes down to uranium. To understand why this matters so much, we need to go back to the summer of 2025. That was when the United States and Israel launched one of the biggest air campaigns Iran had ever faced. American bombers flew from bases inside the United States all the way to Iranian airspace. They dropped the heaviest bunker-busting bombs in the American arsenal on 3 major nuclear sites: Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. At the time, it looked like one of the most complete strikes in modern military history. The buildings collapsed. Power systems for the enrichment sites were destroyed. For a moment, the world believed Iran's nuclear program had been wiped out. But there is a detail from that time that should have gotten more attention than it did, and it still matters today. Before the bombs even landed, satellite images showed unusual truck activity near one of the tunnel entrances at Isfahan. Vehicles were moving in and out in the days right before the strike happened. People who study satellite images for a living believe Iran had already started moving some of its most sensitive material before the first bomb ever fell. Think about what that actually means. Iran was not caught off guard by one of the most advanced airstrikes in history. It saw the strike coming, and it protected the one thing it valued the most. That thing is roughly 400 to nearly 500 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity. That is not the kind of material used for power plants. That is a short technical step away from weapons-grade material, the kind used to build an actual bomb. So here is where things stood after the strikes. The buildings were damaged, the equipment was destroyed. But the material that mattered the most, the uranium itself, is believed to have survived, hidden somewhere the bombs never touched. And that is really where this story begins. Because once that uranium survived, Iran faced a choice, and the choice it made is the reason we are watching this standoff play out today. According to multiple reports coming out of Tehran, Iran's supreme leader gave a clear and firm order. The uranium stays inside the country. It does not matter what any peace deal says. It does not matter how much pressure comes from Washington. It does not matter how badly the economy is suffering. The material does not leave Iranian soil. At the very same time, American officials were reportedly telling their Israeli counterparts that any real and lasting deal would require that uranium to be shipped out of Iran completely, placed somewhere neutral, and checked and verified by international inspectors. Two completely opposite positions, both sides treating their position as final and non-negotiable. And that one disagreement, that single unresolved question, is the seed of almost everything that has happened since. Because here's the hard truth for Iran. The moment the world learned that Iran was holding onto a stockpile of near-weapons-grade uranium somewhere inside its borders, every intelligence agency on the planet was given one clear and obsessive mission. Find it, track it, make sure it never becomes a bomb. That uranium is no longer just a bargaining chip. It has become a target sitting somewhere on Iranian territory, and everyone knows it. Picture a vault so deep that even the bomb built to crack open mountains might not be enough to reach it. That is what American military planners are dealing with right now, and the name of that vault is Pickaxe Mountain. The real name is Ku-e-Kolan Gazla, which translates to Pickaxe Mountain in English. It sits just south of the Natanz enrichment complex, the same site that was hit back in 2025. Iran first told international nuclear inspectors about construction at this location years ago. Back then, it was described as a simple replacement facility, something built after Natanz suffered earlier sabotage. On paper, it sounded like a repair project, nothing unusual. But satellite analysts who have watched this site for years have seen it grow into something far bigger and far tougher than any normal rebuild. Independent researchers believe this facility is buried somewhere around 100 meters underground, dug directly into solid granite rock. That single detail changes everything. Granite is nothing like the softer rock that surrounded Fordo and Natanz. It is dense, it is hard, and it is exactly the kind of rock you would choose if your entire goal was surviving an American bunker-busting bomb. This is the exact problem facing American military planners today. The bomb used back in 2025, the 30,000-pound GBU-57, also known as the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, was built to punch through concrete and rock to destroy deeply buried targets. It is the most powerful bomb of its kind in the American arsenal. But several weapons experts have openly questioned whether even that bomb can reliably reach a target sitting under 100 meters of solid granite. There have reportedly been internal discussions inside the American military about using 2 of these bombs, one right after the other. The idea is simple. The first bomb cracks open the rock. The second bomb follows through and actually punches down to the depth where the material may be stored. It is less like one clean knockout hit and more like trying to break into a reinforced vault. You do not hit it once and hope for the best. You soften it first, then you follow through with everything you have. President Trump has not been quiet about any of this. He has told reporters directly, in plain and simple language, that the United States will be striking Pickaxe Mountain. He described it as something that will happen very soon, and he added that there is nothing Iran can do to stop it. That is not careful, cautious diplomatic language. That is a president publicly placing a countdown clock over a mountain in front of the entire world. Iran's response has followed a familiar pattern. State media has issued warnings that any strike on this facility would be treated as a full expansion of the war. Security officials speaking to international outlets have promised what they call a devastating response if the United States goes through with it. But here's where we need to be honest with ourselves for a moment, because the words coming out of Tehran and the actions on the ground have not been matching up. Iran has been promising devastating responses since this current phase of the conflict reignited earlier this year. And so far, the actual retaliation has mostly amounted to a few intercepted missiles, an occasional downed drone, and a lot of claims on state television that outside observers simply cannot confirm. The word devastating is carrying a very heavy load in that sentence, and the results on the ground have not matched the volume of the threats. So what we are left with is a mountain that may or may not be deep enough to survive an American strike, a president who has publicly promised that strike is coming soon, and a regime that keeps promising a massive response without showing the world proof that it can actually deliver one. That gap between the warning and the reality is exactly what we need to look at next, because it tells us something important about how this entire standoff actually started, and why both sides have already boxed themselves into a corner they cannot easily get out of. There is a kind of trap where the walls do not close in from the outside. They close in because of choices made from the inside, one after another, until there is no way out left. That is exactly what is happening to Iran right now, and it did not happen overnight. To understand how we got here, we need to walk through the timeline, because the order of events actually matters. Back in mid-2026, the United States and Iran signed a real diplomatic framework, a memorandum meant to formally wind down the conflict. Iran put it in writing that it had no intention of building nuclear weapons. Sanctions relief opened up a small window of breathing room. Oil prices, which had spiked during the fighting, dropped as tankers that had been sitting dark on tracking systems suddenly reappeared, legally moving Iranian oil again. For a brief moment, it actually looked like this might hold together. Then came early July. Several ships were attacked while passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and suspicion immediately fell on Iran and its regional allies. The response from the United States was immediate. The president publicly declared the truce effectively over, and the military launched retaliatory strikes on Iranian positions around the strait. From there, things moved fast. Within about a week, American forces had reportedly struck well over 100 separate Iranian military targets in one coordinated wave, hitting missile sites, drone facilities, naval assets, and communication hubs. Iran's answer was to strike back at more ships, this time hitting tankers in nearby international waters. In response, a full naval blockade was placed on Iranian ports within hours. This was the second such blockade in just a few months, and each time it happens, it works almost like cutting off a country's air supply, because more than 90% of Iran's yearly trade depends on that one narrow waterway. Now, let's talk about why this keeps happening, because it comes down to one disagreement that both sides refuse to move away from. Iran's supreme leader has given a direct order that the uranium stays inside the country, no matter what. At the same time, American officials have made it clear that any real and lasting deal requires that uranium to leave Iran completely, placed somewhere neutral and checked by international inspectors. Two positions, both treated as final, both non-negotiable. And that single disagreement is the seed of everything that has followed since. While all of this has been happening, the economy inside Iran has been falling apart at the same time. Before hostilities escalated, Iran was exporting close to 2 million barrels of oil a day. Within a few months, that number collapsed to almost nothing. Iran's currency has lost most of its value. Inflation estimates run anywhere from 50 to nearly 70%, depending on the source. Some economic forecasts suggest Iran's economy could shrink by more than 6% this year alone. There have been reports of investors clashing with security forces, healthcare workers striking over unpaid wages, and retirees protesting in multiple cities. When a government's money runs this low, it starts to reveal what actually holds that government together. And right now, both fear and cash flow appear to be failing at the same time. So now look at the real choice sitting in front of Iran's leadership regarding that uranium, because there are really only three paths, and none of them are good. The first option is to move the material out of the country as part of a real settlement, but the Supreme Leader has already directly forbidden this, and doing it would mean admitting Iran has been hiding the material's exact location for close to a year. The second option is to leave it buried under Pickaxe Mountain and hope that depth and rock are enough to keep it safe. But that is a bet against American weapons technology that is being built specifically to reach targets like this one. The third option is to dilute the material themselves, bringing it down from a dangerous level back towards something closer to ordinary reactor grade, but doing that credibly requires letting international inspectors in to verify it, which the regime has refused to do. None of those three paths lead anywhere good for Iran, and that is exactly the trap. It was not built by the United States. It was built almost entirely out of Iran's own decisions, one choice at a time. Picture a chessboard where one side still has pieces left on it, but has already lost control of the center. That is the position Iran is playing from right now, and the next few moves may decide how this entire standoff ends. Let's start by zooming out, because none of this is happening in isolation. There's a wider regional picture that ties directly back into the uranium question. Inside the United States, lawmakers have reportedly approved tens of billions of dollars specifically tied to funding this ongoing conflict, which tells you where the appetite currently sits among those who control military spending. At the same time, a resolution aimed at pulling back American involvement narrowly passed in one chamber of Congress before failing in the other by a slim margin. That tells us something important. This conflict does not have unanimous support at home. There is real division over how far this should go, but the funding keeps flowing anyway. Meanwhile, Iran's regional allies have reportedly been trying to open up new pressure points to ease the strain. Houthi forces in Yemen have reportedly threatened to block another major shipping route whenever the Strait of Hormuz becomes too dangerous to use. Saudi Arabia has responded by striking those positions directly, understanding exactly how damaging a second blocked waterway would be for global trade. There have also been reports of a regional partner joining direct strike operations inside Iran, a real escalation in terms of how many players are now actively involved, rather than just watching from the sidelines. There has also been talk about outside assistance being given to Iran in the form of targeting information against American positions in the region. If that turns out to be true, it fits a simple pattern. Any country trying to keep America's attention divided across multiple conflicts at once benefits when Washington is forced to focus somewhere else. Now, here's a part of the story that almost nobody wants to say out loud, but plenty of people watching this conflict are quietly thinking about it, and that is succession. Iran's supreme leader is in his mid-80s. Analysts have speculated about a range of outcomes if leadership were to change hands during all of this, everything from a continuation of the current system to a shift toward a more military-led government to, in more hopeful scenarios, some kind of real political change. Nobody knows for certain which path plays out. But it is worth understanding that this uranium standoff is not happening separately from that leadership question. A government facing this much pressure from every direction, led by a man whose eventual exit will trigger its own internal struggle, is not operating from a position of long-term strength. It is operating from a position of trying to survive one crisis at a time. So where does this actually go from here? If Pickaxe Mountain does eventually get struck, and every signal coming out of Washington suggests that is a matter of when rather than if, the real question becomes whether the uranium is even still there by the time the bombs fall. It could have already been moved somewhere else that nobody is currently tracking. It could remain exactly where analysts believe it is, protected by depth and rock that may or may not hold up. Either way, the story keeps moving forward. If the material survives, Iran still faces the exact same problem it has right now, a hidden stockpile that keeps justifying continued pressure. If it gets destroyed, that in some strange way removes the single biggest sticking point in this entire conflict, because there is no longer a physical object left to fight over. So here's the question worth sitting with as you finish this video. Do you think Pickaxe Mountain gets struck in the next few weeks, or does this drag into a much longer standoff? Do you think Iran eventually hands that material over under enough pressure, or would the regime rather let the whole structure collapse before admitting they were sitting on it the whole time? Drop your honest answer in the comments below, because right now, nobody outside a small circle of intelligence officials actually knows for certain. If this video helped you understand why this uranium stockpile matters so much, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with someone who has been trying to follow this conflict, but keeps losing the thread.